Now, but what if it was precisely this, namely the existence of central banks and easy money and easy credit, which were the true causes of the crisis? This, as you, I'm sure, know, have heard probably from Bob Murphy, I was not at his speech. This is, of course, what the Austrian thesis is. This is the thesis that Mises first developed in his book on money and credit, published in 1912. And Austrian economists who had learned from Mises and had studied in detail this thesis, easy money and easy credit are the causes of economic crisis, were in fact the only ones who did predict the crisis in time. To name just two, Mark Thornton predicted the crisis correctly a year before it broke out, roughly. And another friend, Frank Shostak, did the same. Austrians also correctly predicted the crisis that we had in 2001, the internet crisis. And Austrian economists had already predicted, Mises and Hayek, the great crash that occurred in 1929. Now you would think that given their record of successful predictions, that governments and so forth should have and would have turned to Austrians for advice. Now, what do we do in this situation? The question is, why didn't they ask Austrians? And the answer is quite simple. Because what the Austrians give as advice, what their answer is, how do we avoid these types of crises in the future, is absolutely unacceptable to the powers that be. Because that would imply, and that will become clearer as I go on in my speech, that would basically imply that the central bank would have to be abolished and the current monetary system built around central banks would have to disappear, that governmental paper currencies, fiat currencies, would have to be abolished, would have to disappear. And of course, if such reforms would have been instituted, this would have meant mass unemployment among most macroeconomists. So most macroeconomists cannot possibly accept recommendations such as this, because that would basically say nothing else but, okay, I have to be in favor of me becoming unemployed, me doing something that is absolutely useless. It is easy to see that to give recommendations such as this is a difficult thing to do, psychologically speaking. But this time, in this crisis, in contrast to, let's say, the Great Depression beginning in 1929, it was not possible anymore to simply ignore what the Austrians had said. Because in the age of the internet, the view of the Austrians and the successful prediction of the crisis by a number of Austrian economists could not be ignored. It was just a public record. People could see that these guys somehow knew something that other people obviously didn't know. So after a long time of almost complete neglect of Austrians, and in particular the Austrian business cycle theory, in the course of this crisis, a discussion about what the Austrians had to say resumed. The Austrian business cycle came back and people began to be interested in it and studied it, what they had not done for decades before. Now I want to explain what this Austrian business cycle theory is like. As all fundamental theorems, the Austrian business cycle theory is in a way a very simple argument. Once you have grasped it, you have little doubt that it is essentially true, because you can understand why it is true. This is, by the way, also so for Mises' argument why calculation under socialism is impossible. Once you hear the argument, if there is no private property in factors of production, then there are no prices for factors of production. If there are no prices for factors of production, then you cannot compare input prices with output prices. You cannot determine whether you produce efficiently or inefficiently. Once you have grasped this argument, you are surprised that it has taken so long to take hold in the general profession. It is a very simple argument once you have heard it and grasped it once. And the situation with the Austrian business cycle theory is in a way very similar. Now assume that you are a central banker. That is, you are the only person, the only institution in the country that is allowed to produce paper money. I jump over the question, how was it possible that paper money even came into existence? Because we cannot begin monetary development with just paper money. Paper was initially just titles to something else. But I jump over this problem. Assume that you are at the stage where paper money has, in fact, successfully been introduced. Should mention, of course, that can never be done without engaging in some sort of criminal activity. But this crime, let's forget. So you are the only person in the country that can print paper money. Nobody else is allowed to do it. Anybody else who does it will be jailed as a counterfeiter and put into prison. Now, what will you do if you have this type of monopoly power? Now, if you were an angel, you might not do anything. But if you are just a normal person, you will, of course, realize that you have some sort of magic wand. All you need to do is you print up at almost zero cost pieces of paper, and then you can turn around and buy a Mercedes or a BMW with this piece of paper. You will also make a surprising discovery, or not so surprising discovery, namely that you have far more friends than you ever imagined that you might have, who all come to you and tell you, look, I need a BMW, also a nicer house would also not so bad for me. Can you help me out? And they, of course, will also promise to help you out insofar as to propagandize the idea of how valuable your service is as a central banker, that you can print money out of thin air. Now, what is the consequence if I print up additional sums of paper money? I should add one one additional thought. Now, what are the consequences of printing up additional money? Obviously, by printing up additional money, society as a whole cannot be made richer. If that could be done, then we could not explain why there are any poor countries on earth. After all, even the craziest countries in the world are able to run printing machines. And we could not explain why it is that there is a single poor person on earth. But nonetheless, and this is something that I find often mind-boggling, it seems that the entire economic profession believes in alchemy. That is, they all, again, recall, increasing the money supply is the way that we are trying to get ourselves out of a crisis. Almost the entire economics profession seems to believe in the same sort of miracle that alchemists believed in. That you can take something that is absolutely worthless and somehow create wealth with this. Additional pieces of paper are just that. Additional pieces of paper, not increasing the wealth in society that consists of consumer goods and producer goods one whit. Now, what this new money does is, of course, it raises prices. But while it cannot make society as a whole richer, it can make those people richer who get the money first and spend the new money first. He who gets the money first can now buy additional goods. Prices then begin to rise. Those people who get the new money last, or not at all, or later, they will have to pay higher prices. So additional sums of money redistribute income within society without making society as a whole richer. Those people who get the money first become richer at the expense of those people who receive the money very late in the process. They become poorer as a result. So it engenders a redistribution of wealth and income in society, but it cannot possibly make society as a whole richer. Now, from your point of view, again recall, you are the central banker. From your point of view, of course, this system is just simply perfect. And of course also for your friends. Except it has one flaw, and the flaw is it is easy for other people to realize what is going on. It is, people realize, oh, this guy is simply printing up money, and then he buys himself something nice, and in the course of it, and of course, those people who get the money next, they are also improving their standard of living, but the rest of the people will become poorer as a consequence. That is, this simple, easy money policy, while that is perfect from your point of view, has the major disadvantage that almost everyone, after a short period of time, will realize this is just a big fraud.